We're just gonna talk. We're just gonna go through it. So, my biggest observation out of this one is that I didn't think I'd be watching Anderson Varejao, D Wade, and Kevin Love playing in 2021 on the court together.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't expect it either, but here we are. It's a brave new world that reminds me of the old one. Yeah, it's definitely a surprise to see Varejao out there. I'm loving Dean Wade. Like he's probably been one of my.
He's a starter, huh?
Well, he's not
at this point. At this point,
well, not quite, because Kevin Love is still starting over him. I honestly, my hot take, and I unleashed this on the podcast yesterday, was I don't think the Cavs actually have a starting power forward on the roster right now. Like I just don't think that Love is kind of providing the reliability you need from that position. I think Larry Nance could be a starter, but you probably don't want him playing starters minutes. You want to kind of keep him fresh coming in there with the second unit. And Dean Wade, I mean, he's proven himself to be a rotation player. That's a really nice find for the Cavs, but I don't think there's like NBA starter in his future.
So I just saw a nice scramble switch, Kevin Love on the Thompson right there. And we'll obviously bounce back and forth a bit between like what the hell happened to the Cavs this year, which is less of a question than what the hell happened to the Celtics this year. That is just one of the things I see that the Celtics never do defensively. They never switch off of mismatches, which is something they used to do under Stevens quite a bit and quite well. And they've obviously been a disaster defensively, especially within the last month or so. And so I just see something like that from the Cavs, who have actually been a pretty good defense this year, not as much in the second half of the season. And I'm just like, why can't you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing with the Cavs this year, especially defensively, so they've been league average for most of the year. May has kind of tanked that, but when you're missing 8 guys of the rotation and you're out of the play-in picture and you're playing G League guys, like that's going to fall apart a little bit. But I felt last year on both ends of the floor, too frequently, like they were trying to always change things up. Okay, we're going to throw different looks at teams defensively, or we're going to try to run a bunch of different things offensively. And they really simplified things. Like they, for the most part, play drop coverage defensively. Everyone knows what their assignments are. And for a team that's been starting 4 guys that are 22 or younger, go simplicity, get the basics down pat, and then you can build off of that, right? So I think that's been one of the keys for them kind of sustaining better defensive play this year. And obviously, like having Larry Nance play such a significant role was a big part of them having a good defense. Jared Allen, Andre Drummond was playing good defense when he was with the team. So it's definitely been a surprise, because you don't expect going younger and starting a 19-year-old that your defense is going to go from one of the worst in history to league average.
Yeah. No, and they were really good to start the year. That's when they were way up in the rankings. I thought one of the best defenses. Is Nance part of the future? You mentioned him. He's not out there tonight, but that's a guy who gets tossed around in trade talks quite a bit. Obviously, I know you love him. I think Cavs fans in general love him, but you always hear his name thrown out there. Is that just other teams wanting him and there really being nothing there? Or do you think they could move on from him?
Yeah, I think obviously there's demand for him after the trade deadline passed, and even leading up to it. I think there was about 6 or 7 teams that were reported to have had interest, and some offered multiple first-round picks. I can't imagine they'd be super high ones, but I do think that the Cavs recognized some of the mistakes from the post-decision rebuild, which was they didn't have adults in the locker room. They didn't have guys that could kind of set the tone and set an example as Fournier hits a 3.
There we go.
Which is very good for my fantasy team that's missing Jaylen Brown, but picked
up
Evan
You have Fournier. Nice. I'll get to Fournier.
Someone dropped him with COVID, and it's really helped make up for the fact that I'm missing Jaylen Brown right now. So
I've been thrilled with him on this team, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, he's a nice fit. But I think Nance, probably you'd have to blow their socks off. Like, I think he would be part of maybe a larger deal where they are consolidating talent to go in for an established, proven player. I don't think they're just looking for late first or anything like that. So, I mean, I don't think anybody on this team's untouchable. You're not a good enough team to have untouchable players, and everybody has a price. But I do think they would really need to be wowed to move on from Larry Nance.
So this is the thing about the Celtics. and we've been saying this on the post-game show for a couple nights. If you told someone that, and obviously things changed within the last week, but even like before that, things are starting to go off the rails a little bit here. But if you told someone that Evan Fournier would be a perfect fit, great addition to this team, Jaylen Brown would get better, Jayson Tatum would get better, Rob would become a starter on this team, Kemba would be perfectly fine. In fact, as good as ever to end the season. All these different things that happen, even guys like Aaron Nesmith and Peyton Pritchard contributing the way they have, you would think that this team would be in an awesome spot this year. But none of those things happened at the same time, and none of it lasted throughout the year. And honestly, like even when things were going great, it never connected to other guys. And that was the biggest thing this year, is that one person's success never went down the roster or even across the court at the same time as other guys. And that's going to be what they have to solve this offseason. I don't think it's doomsday for this team, but they have to find out ways to be more connected on both ends of the court, because they have individual pieces here. It's just they never connect.
And I don't think that's a unique phenomenon for the Celtics either. Like, I think for the most part, like outside of, let's say, Utah, Phoenix, and maybe a couple other teams at the top, the teams at the top have been the healthiest. I don't think there's very many teams across the NBA that are their averages. I don't think any team is their offensive rating and their defensive rating, because most teams have gone through massive stretches of roster turnover, being hit with COVID injuries, no real recovery time, no time to practice. You look at the home and road splits for a lot of teams. Like, there's a lot of times where road teams this season, depending on the market, have not had the opportunity to even have a pregame shoot around. I know when the Cavs had a losing streak,
they've avoided it at times too because of the COVID stuff.
Right, exactly. So I think for those reasons, it's so hard when you're trying to integrate new pieces, or when you have guys in and out of the lineup, whether it be injuries or COVID, to develop chemistry, continuity, and make adjustments when you don't have practice time, when you don't have shoot around time. Like I know from a Cavs perspective, there's been about 6 seasons crammed into this one. Like there's been really dramatic different stretches throughout this year where you have a 10-game losing streak, and then you have like a 6-game winning streak. You have April where they had a good offense, they were getting 3-pointers up, the defense was good, and then you have this May stretch where they're just terrible. Like it's such a tough season, and so many people wanted to call last year the Mickey Mouse ring. I think this year is as far removed from the actual talent and actual standings of this league as we've ever seen in the NBA. This is the most unpredictable year. I think it's the least accurate sample size we have ever had in NBA history.
You think we'll end up with like a Utah champion? As undesirable as that would be, or
no,
even something crazier like let's say, I don't know, Milwaukee wouldn't even. I mean, that's kind of the thing about this year. I think people already have it set in their minds that there could be an array of champions.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I slammed some money on Denver to make the finals, and then Jamal Murray tore his ACL shortly after that, which sucked. But my thought process was, I don't know if LeBron and AD are going to be able to stay healthy for a playoff run. Like, that's a lot of time. Like,
we could even end up with Lakers Heat again, and no one would be surprised.
I'd be a little surprised. I'm not buying into Miami. I think Bucks or
they're
Sixers.
Coming alive.
Bucks or Sixers, I think, are coming out of the East. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the year it just clicks for Milwaukee, because they've been healthy for the most part. Drew Holiday's a nice addition, and I just think, like, as much as I hate Budenholzer as a playoff coach, I just don't have a lot of confidence in anybody.
I don't know who I'm going to – I probably have to go Clippers again, but after last year, I think of the proposition of going all in on them, and I'm, like, very nervous.
I have less faith in the Clippers than just about anybody. I don't buy that team having what it takes or the desire to go out there and actually win a championship.
But Rondo –
Don't do that to me. Don't make me talk about playoff Rondo. Yes, he hit a bunch of threes in a bubble situation where the shooting, the sight lines were fantastic, and we have a pretty large sample size that didn't carry over to this season. And I don't think he's going to be a 3-point shooter now. I like my biggest thing with the Clippers. So the difference between, to me, the Clippers and other teams that are flip the switch type teams is when LeBron, when Steph, when all the Kevin Durant, when they hit that playoff gear, they elevate the players around them. Kawhi Leonard doesn't do that. For as great as Kawhi Leonard is, he takes it to another level defensively. He's going to hit his mid-range shots. He's going to do what he does, but it's not like all of a sudden Kawhi trying harder is going to open up passing lanes and create better looks for other teammates. That's just not his game. It's not a fault of him, but it's a fault in the Clippers for not recognizing that and getting a more reliable playmaker than Rajon Rondo. You can bank on playoff Rondo, but I've also seen playoff Rondo be absolutely awful in Dallas to the degree that it just ripped that team apart and killed their postseason run, and they had to bench him. Like, yeah, I guess you can bank on Rondo, but I just think when you look at the talent in the league, like you mentioned how good Boston is and the players that they have playing exceptionally well, like 99th percentile outcomes for their season, Brown and Tatum being chief among them.
Yep.
Look how much damn talent is. Look at the talent on teams that are missing the playoffs this year. Like you like look, especially if there wasn't a play-in. I have this list saved because I did this yesterday for the podcast. But
I'm thinking of Chicago for sure.
If there wasn't a play-in, these are names of players that would be outside of the playoffs this year. And I think this needs to go into the calculus when people talk about winning basketball. Like at this point, even the bad teams have so much talent, and it's about whether or not you're maximizing it. But here are players that would miss the playoffs if there wasn't a play-in. Lowry, Van Vliet, Siakam, Beal, Westbrook, Levine, Vucevic, Sabonis, Turner, LeVert, Brogdon, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Horford, Towns, Edwards, Russell, Fox, Hield, Halliburton, Zion, Lonzo, Bledsoe, DeRozan, Murray, Morant, Jaren Jackson, and Valanciunas.
The league tried twice to get Zion in there. It's just not happening.
Dude, like, those are good damn basketball players. And like, it's a reflection of how weird this season is. But like, when you're talking about, are you going to win 4 rounds in the playoffs? And those are the type of players that are missing the playoffs. I'm just not going to buy into Rondo being the cornerstone of a championship in 2021.
Well, that's what I think is so difficult for Celtics fans and probably Cavaliers fans to some degree too, is that with the competition in this league, it's going to make it so hard. Like, you like certain players on the Cavaliers. I think Celtics fans are right to love a lot of players that they have, but you just look up at the top, and as long as Durant, Kyrie, and Harden are rolling in Brooklyn and willing to stay there, Giannis is committed to Milwaukee long term. You have something building with the Knicks right now with some quality young talent there. At any given moment, you could even see some other teams rise up to the top if their best guys are able to step up to a new level. So just the amount of great young players that are coming into the league every year and just how spread out the talent has become across the league makes it difficult to kind of say that you're that shoo-in. I mean, you didn't even mention Brooklyn as a champion possibility out of the East here, and that's just how good the East is right now. That team with 3 stars isn't necessarily a shoo-in to get into the finals. I think that goes beyond the weirdness of the season. I think that could continue next year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I still don't buy Brooklyn long term because one, Harden said before the trade even happened, or there was a report that this is going to be a pit stop for him. Like he's just here for a couple of years, try to win a championship, and then he'll move on. Kyrie probably will retire by the end of this contract. He wants to retire early. It's something he's talked about many times. Kevin Durant, is he going to stick around? Like those are all questions, right? So the thing with Brooklyn to me is it reminds me of Miami year 1, where I just don't think the supporting cast is there. I think
really, I love their supporting cast.
I just don't think that there's enough chemistry and continuity there. I think the supporting cast is better than Miami had year 1 when they assembled the Heatles, because like you had like Dexter Pittman and Mike Bibby getting a standing ovation just because he's not Carlos Arroyo. Like that was a really, really bad supporting cast. But I just think that it takes time. Like all of these teams, when they come together, it usually takes a year. And whether or not Kevin Durant's going to be able to elevate to that playoff level coming off of that Achilles tear in year one, that's a big question. Are they going to stay healthy for a playoff run? That's a big question. If those three stay healthy, I think there's a chance that they can do it. I'm just risk averse when I'm doing these projections. Like I just think that these type of things take time, and that's not necessarily an indictment on any of the players there.
For sure. I have concerns about the defense. I like their depth. I like Jeff Green. You know what Jeff Green can do come postseason time in a complimentary role behind, 3-4 guys. Never, if they're fully healthy there. I love Bruce Brown defensively on the boards. Jordan, I'm not crazy about, but at this point, I like his size considering some of the matchups that they might have to go through out there. And I love what Kyrie's doing this year. Like, frankly, even with his hiatus and then the short second one, overall, I just think he's been such a ginormous positive for them this year. And I like the way he's playing off the ball there. And that's always something I think you've talked about too, is that you can get him going in an off-ball role and have it be successful. And it's been highly successful there, especially in the short stint that we saw him playing with Harden. And Harden, wow, does he blow me away. And in fact, when we write the story on the Celtics this year, there'll be a lot of second guesses. I've been thinking a lot about the Brown-Harden trade and what that possibly could have become. I really have. And it's crazy because if you asked at the time, everybody in Celtics Nation was just like, no way. And now you look at it and it's just like, that was a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it is a missed opportunity, but at the same time, you got to really evaluate, like, were you a piece away? And I think like COVID was such a wild card that if you are doing something where you're mortgaging the future, you want to have a little more certainty than you have this season. And like Boston's been hit with COVID more than any other team. Like I really give them a pass for this season. Like I still think their future outlook looks really good. But when you have Jayson Tatum saying that he needs an inhaler after before every single game, when that wasn't something that was part of his routine before, like that's concerning, man.
And Brown's been hurt all year. He really was. He was playing through a lot of stuff.
And look at Kemba. Kemba. Like that was a massive question mark. So as much as in hindsight you can say, okay, Kemba's playing better now. We kind of know how things played out. You have to go back to what you're known, like what known aspects were there at the time. And there weren't a lot. Like Kemba was a huge question mark. Brown was probably your brightest story to start the year. Like they're as great as Tatum is, and like Tatum's in that top 15 type player conversation. Jaylen Brown's right there. Like that is the best young wing tandem in the league. Like I absolutely, like that's the number one best wing tandem in the league. I think that's your dream of what you would want at that position. So not mortgaging that for a guy that his dedication to the game, especially in playoffs, has been a consistent question, that he's out of shape, really moping and not performing well in Houston. Like, yeah, in hindsight, maybe looking at how Harden's playing now, you'd want him in the mix. But does he buy into the same degree if he's not playing with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, if he doesn't have Mike D'Antoni, who he wanted to play with? Like, there's so stars in this league can be so damn fickle. And I think that's important to remember.
Well, it's so interesting because we talked about Rondo with the Clippers and how much that matters just because of how great of a passer he is. The reason I think about it is because we've seen how good of a passer Harden can be. And I was worried about his fit with Tatum, but now that I think about seeing what he's done in Brooklyn, he could get Tatum the ball on a consistent basis. He could probably improve the shot making for a lot of players up and down this roster, depending on how you feel about some of the young guys. My biggest question going forward with the Celtics is, can you solve some of their ball spreading issues by just getting an average passing guard, a role player to focus on that skill set? Or do you need a star who's so great at that, like a Harden, like a, it's not easy to get any of those guys, but Harden's a guy I think of because he was constantly dishing out somewhere between 10 to 15 assists right when he got to Brooklyn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, I don't know. There's no easy answers when it comes to team building. And like, as much as I've given Ainge hell in the past for not pulling the trigger on deals, like that's just not one that I'm jumping at. Like I still think there's going to be opportunities for Boston to consolidate assets down the road. And I think you can build a championship team around Brown and Tatum. Like I absolutely believe that to be true. So this might just be one of those star-crossed years where Who knows how it would have went with Harden. I'm looking at the chat right now, and there's a comment of, "Don't the Cavs want to lose? How are they hanging with Boston?"
Well, let us talk about this game on in front of us.
Yeah, I'll lend a little bit of insight to that. So the Cavs aren't trying to lose. I think that's an important distinction.
It's all natural, baby.
Yeah, it's been organic losses because last year, with the season being cut short, they lost valuable developmental opportunities, and they were in the play-in mix like last month. They had an opportunity to get into those playing games. And I think where everything kind of went off the rails was they got Kevin Love back. They got Jared Allen back. They got Larry Nance back. I don't know if you're aware, Bobby, but Larry Nance, right after returning from a concussion, I believe, he contracted a viral infection. He lost over 20 pounds in a week and was hospitalized. So when he came back, he wasn't himself. I think he had like a 33 true shooting percentage. You could tell he's visibly frustrated. He didn't have that same strength, that same pop that he had. Jared Allen coming back from a bad concussion, he's still not himself. Like he's still a little foggy. He's working his way back to health. Kevin Love, coming off a quad injury and kind of Achilles situation as well, missed 3/4 of the season, never really got his footing, never got his conditioning. So I think the Cavs saw, hey, we have our names back. These guys are back on the court, but they weren't producing at the level that you were accustomed to. Like, even though there's been a drop off with Kevin Love, he isn't as bad as he's been playing. Jared Allen is a more productive player. Larry Nance has been their most impactful player this season, but he wasn't playing at a high level. And then as things started to click, as Darius Garland started to play well and go from a 17-6 player to a 21-8 type guy, as Isaac Okoro was playing better, everyone got hurt.
He's been incredible.
Everyone got hurt.
Yeah.
Like this team, like Darius Garland is the straw that stirs the drink. Like, he is behind Larry Nance on-off numbers. He's the most impactful player on this team. He makes everybody better, and you don't have him. Delly's out. They don't have a point guard or a backup point guard right now. Collin Sexton is attempting to play point guard, but it's not his natural position. That's not the way that he's naturally geared towards. So they're still trying to be competitive and make the most of every game and every opportunity. But when you're playing this many G League players, when you are playing without a point guard, you're not going to be competitive. And they're still so damn young. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And then you get to this May stretch with everybody out. Every single team you play is a playoff team that is trying to avoid the play-in game. Like, that's been the situation. So, I mean, you're going to lose games. It's that simple.
Anything's been possible against the Celtics in recent weeks.
Dude, apparently, like I am still surprised you guys like that. It's this close. Like, all that being said, Boston should be better than they are right now.
They lost to the Thunder in the midst of 21 Thunder losses in 22 games.
I did appreciate that. Thank you very much, because I do want Cade Cunningham.
And it's looking tight. I'm looking at that. Oh my Lord! I gotta throw the tankathon.
Buddy, that's exactly like. I'm not one to root for losses. I'm never going to root for losses, but at least make the Cavs earn it if they're going to get this loss. Like, the really exciting thing is the four most consistent players, and the best, like the best thing you can look at the Cavs is Garland, Sexton, Okoro, and Allen. Those are four young players that fit together incredibly well. And this is a draft full of forwards and guys that fit alongside them. So you want to be in that top four. I do believe in karma, though. So I think trying to win all of these games and be competitive is going to pay off. And the lottery gods are going to smile in their favor.
It also doesn't really matter. With these odds you look at, it's 50-50 if you're in the top four, pretty much. People across the lottery can make a big jump up, which is going to be interesting, because if the Celtics do end up bowing out here and say they get to 12 or 13 because of the play-in loss, it's a chance there. 4% at 13 again in the top four, 7% at 12 or jumping up. That's not nothing. So look, a lot of crazy stuff's going to happen.
If you guys jump the Cavs in the lotto, I'm just going to be a wreck. Like that would be. as
Well,
painful, if not more, than when the Lakers signed LeBron but picked higher than the Cavs. Luckily, that situation got botched. They traded it to New Orleans. New Orleans made the mistake of trading back and taking Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker rather than just pick Darius Garland, who running a pick and roll with Zion would be unstoppable. But you know what? Their loss, our gain.
at least no one's Houston sitting there with a coin flip and the worst record of keeping that pick. That's scary. That is scary stuff if you're them. 6 straight losses, 3 for the Pistons, 8 for the Thunder, 11 for the Cavs, and 4 for the Magic. It's that time of year. And even the Raptors are making a late push down there, sitting everybody. This is going to be quite the lottery race here. And it's interesting because you really don't have that great of a chance in this new lottery by losing a ton of games. And frankly, it feels like the play-in tournament on top of that has made this one of the least tanked years I can remember. Now it's turned up over the last week or two. But until about 2 weeks ago, like you said, Cavs were in the play-in tournament with a distant chance of getting in there not too long ago. Toronto's been right on the edge of that all season long, despite everything they've gone through. New Orleans, again, the league wants them there, but they can't get there. But they were in that race all year. Washington was as bad as anyone to start this year, and now they're a lock. They might even become the 8th seed in the East if they finish strong. This play-in tournament has been a smash hit when it comes to competition.
It's not going away. Like, I think this is just permanently part of the NBA now. It's exciting. It gives teams games to play for. Like, when the Cavs were, they had a week where they played the Bulls twice, they played the Wizards twice, and that was basically to decide whether or not they're going to remain in the play-in mix, right? And obviously Washington was playing incredibly well. The Bulls, they split the 2 games against the Bulls without Zach LaVine. But that's good opportunities. Like, that's the closest thing this team is going to have to playoff games against teams that are desperate, the teams that made moves to make the playoffs, adding Westbrook, adding Vucevic, adding Tice for the Bulls. Like, these were teams that are desperate to make it, and that's good experience. Like, I think you can have constructive losses. Like, a lot of those games came down to the wire, and it was like a late turnover from Garland and things, usable game film, basically. And that's why, especially under these new lottery odds, as much as I hate that it draws for 4 spots and it really opens up the opportunity of how far you can fall, I do think flattening the odds is productive because you give teams more incentive to go out there and make the most of every single game. Because when you are in games, and whether it's a win or a loss, when you're in close games late, that's usable game film. That's something that you can constructively look at and build upon in the offseason.
So what's standing out about this one you so far? Locked at 69. Beginning of the 4th, this one's on track to be an 85 kind of game, as it has been with the Cavs over the last 20-30 games. That's something I guess you can say about the Cavs, is they do kind of lock some of these teams they play into the kind of games that they want to play here. This definitely isn't boding well for Boston, and they've been blowing teams out on the offensive end of the floor, struggling immensely on the defensive side of the floor. But Kevin Love's playing well in his return here. I love Isaac Okoro. I've told you that since the day they drafted him. Awesome.
That was going to be my standout thing, is Isaac Okoro guarding Jayson Tatum. Like, he's making him work. We had Jackson Frank on the podcast last week, and I thought he made a really great observation. And
he's a good dude. I like his coverage.
Good human being, and a really great analyst. But he was talking about how, when he was talking to Thibault, how the next step for him early in his career was going from playing good defense and being in position to learning the tendencies of players and anticipating that and taking that away. Because Okoro is someone that he's sticking with guys, right? Like, he's making them hit tough shots. But when you're guarding the best players in the league, which I think he's in the top 6 or 7 in terms of matchup difficulty on a night-to-night basis as a 19-year-old, when you're guarding those type of guys, they're tough shot makers, right? Like, they're still getting to their spots and they're shooting over your hand, but they're comfortable. the next step for him is going to be learning those tendencies and taking that away, forcing them into different spots. But the fact that he has embraced the defensive end of the floor already early in his career and the impact he's making, man, it's exciting. It is really exciting, especially for a team that hasn't had a defensive prospect in a very long time. Look at Kevin Love playing well, hitting that three.
That's exactly what they need. This team has no shooting outside of him, really, a reliable shooting at the very least. What's his deal going forward? We all watched the thing against Toronto. There's been a few moments like that over the years from him, and I'm sure he thinks he probably should have been traded at this point. But again, injuries strike, and he's not out there a ton. What do you really expect with a contract like that? So he's going to be there.
He talked about that with Chris Haynes openly, where he's like, I play a role in this. Like, availability is the best ability. And if I want to be moved, I need to play well. The Toronto one was actually a unique situation because obviously when that gets taken out of context, everyone assumes it's like every other breakdown that he's had where he's frustrated with the situation. This was the reverse. This is actually, and I'm actually a little sympathetic to him in this situation. I hated him going on with Chris Haynes and kind of talking about, I'd love to be with the Blazers and whatnot. Like, I think that's such a bad look to do that publicly. But what I sympathize with him was last year, he only missed 7 games. He was healthy and productive all of last season. And now this year, we're through within the first month of the season, the Cavs were in the playoffs. Like, they were a top 10 defense. They were playing well. The young guys were finally stepping up and playing the level that you'd want. And he's not a part of it. He was hurt. He missed the first 3 quarters of the season. The first year that the Cavs are playing good competitive basketball since LeBron left, he wasn't a part of that. And he really could have helped. Like, we saw once he came back in April, their offense went from league worst to middle of the pack, even though he wasn't shooting well. So I understand the frustration. And in that Toronto game, it was a 1-possession game.
Yeah, that's the key.
He had just been hit to the floor, the ground, the possession before without a call, and was bleeding from his leg. Then he just got smacked into the stanchion by Malachi Flynn and hadn't had no whistle on the play. And as he's recovering, the ref throws him a bullet pass that he wasn't ready for, and he just smacked it. That wasn't a situation where he's frustrated at his teammates. His teammates were playing well. They were in a competitive game. It was frustration with the refs. But you have to understand, especially as someone that's trying to be a leader for this team, you need to understand that moment is going to look bad. It's going to look like every single moment that you had in previous seasons, and you need to be better than that, which he owned up to. He acknowledged it. But when that clip goes around, that's going to be the assumption everybody has.
Well, I can think of a similar moment for Jayson Tatum within the last couple of weeks, and his leadership has been challenged in various platforms this year. Brad Stevens and the Celtics have been turning the ball over like crazy all year long. Probably the biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team is how they protect the basketball. It's just 10 turnover night after 15, after 20. It's just been since opening night. That's been the story of this year, or one of the many stories of this year, that they don't protect the ball. And that goes back to ball handlers, that goes back to facilitators, that kind of thing. So before that Sunday matinee game against the Hornets, Brad Stevens is imploring the team, protect the ball, protect the ball. That's pretty much his whole pregame interview.
Mm-hmm.
And Tatum goes out and just off the inbound throws the laziest toss pass to Kemba Walker as Terry Rozier is storming up the court, and everyone can see him rushing up the court like a train to get in front of the pass and finish. And I thought it was the lowest moment of the year. Indicative of so many problems with the team this year. So you started this thing talking about all the excuses with the Celtics, and they're all valid. But there's something deeper here, too, to the point where, and I wrote about this last week, this team doesn't play like a Brad Stevens team. They don't run. Right. They don't move the ball. They don't play great defense as most of his teams have. But they certainly don't protect the three-point line. Just all the things you'd expect, young players stepping up. Everything you expected from all these Brad Stevens teams over the years, this team doesn't do. And in fact, they almost seem to play in defiance of how he wants them to play stylistically. And that's what worries me going into the future, because despite all the calls for his job, he's not going anywhere, Brad Stevens, that is. I I don't know if he's lost the team. I think on certain nights he loses the team. Certain nights they lock in and play great to his game plan. I think the Warriors win.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of up and down. And I don't know. Maybe he can get this team back in a good place if things are more stable next year and everyone feels better about the situation and what's going on. I think he deserves another chance. But I'm worried that if they don't fully buy into him, the stars of this team, and they just keep stringing along with him, that's just going to continue to cause instability in the future seasons. But at the same time, who do you get instead? That's an even harder question. So I think you just bring him back and see how it goes next year. Now, I do think they need some assistant help. They've lost Carol Lawson. They've lost Mika Shrewsbury. They've lost numerous people off the bench, Walter McCarty. So I think that's probably somewhere that they can improve, but they're not going to fire Brad. And I wonder how that's going to play out in seasons to come.
Yeah, no, I think your point about the assistants is good because I think often we assume front office decisions are made by one guy and coaching is done by one person, when in reality, like, you're managing a staff. Like, I think actually with COVID this year and no crowds, you can see just how massive that coaching staff is, like, for every team. Like, it is rows upon rows of people that all contribute, that all collaborate to coach a team. And I think bringing in, like, from the Cavs perspective, the players are really bought into what JB Bickerstaff is doing. You can see that reflected in how well they're playing defensively. He's been begging them to take more threes, and that's been a process fighting those natural tendencies. Garland being a pass-first guy, Sexton being a slasher, Okoro being a very raw prospect offensively. But as you move forward and as these players become better, like, you might need to get an assistant that helps bring a little spice, a little creativity offensively to help generate those 3-point looks. Like, and I think that might be the case for Boston, where you just have to have the right assistants in place that help alleviate some of the pressure on Stevens, that maybe help bring a few wrinkles and help maximize the talent that they have. Like, everything's going to, the credit and the blame is going to fall on Stevens, but in reality, it's, the emphasis has to be on filling out a coaching staff and addressing any weaknesses he has, because assuming you still have confidence in Stevens and his ability to lead, that's the most important thing from a head coach. You that he has buy-in from the players, that they're going to listen to what he's doing, and you have to figure out, is this drop off in playing the style that you want? Is it a result of no longer having assistants that were doing that? Or is it an issue of the players no longer having the same buy-in and not listening to Stevens the same way? That's not something I can comment on. I have no idea what the inner workings are, and I'm always lenient to go off and criticize and say what's happening with coaches. But that's obviously a discussion they need to have.
That's one of the hardest things about gauging this team this year. You know, no one's obviously in the room. There's one guy on the road with the team. There's not a ton of visuals of frustration and dissonance and that kind of stuff. You just kind of go off the results. And like you said, it's hard to pull the team's coaching ability from the results, but just because of everything else going on. So that's probably how he gets a pass, is all the things that have gone wrong with this team from an injury, COVID, and all that kind of standpoint. But I think if you watch game in and game out, there are troubling trends as well. Competition being among them. They don't compete at a high level. And I think that's a problem because, yes, they've had a lot of people missing through various games, but they've also had a lot there. And I think another hallmark of Stevens' teams throughout the year is that in spite of things that have gone wrong in previous seasons, they've played above those expectations. I mean, I was just saying this yesterday. If the Celtics just completely fell off the map in 2018 after Hayward went down, especially after Kyrie went down, that's almost what everyone expected to happen, that they were going to be a 7-8 seed, just kind of in the middle of the league, and their depth wasn't able to get them there. But they just competed hard. They played great defense, and they rose up to their competition at a high level. This year, I mean, they've been blown out by some bad teams. They have had some horrible starts to games, and frankly, the effort doesn't look like it's there through various points. Is that exhaustion with the season? Is it a guy like Tatum not having the wind under him? I don't know, but
I mean, I don't have to take your word for it. I'm looking at it right now.
Yes, it's happening again here. And you know what drives me crazy? We started this season talking about Tristan Thompson being a potential game changer for this
Yeah.
team. And he has been anything but.
Didn't he get sick with COVID too?
He did, and he came back playing really well for about a month after, and I gave him a ton of credit for that. He's dealing with a pec strain right now, so I think that's impacted him over the last 4 or 5 games. But overall this year, I haven't loved his compete level, especially to start this year. And like you said, he was dealing with an injury then, so maybe they bring him back next year and it's healthier and all goes better. But I don't like his style all that much, driving into the paint, taking tough shots, shooting 51% this year, and taking a lot of those shots. At times, he's refused to kick out offensive rebounds and instead is shot into crowds. Defensively, he hasn't impacted them all that much, and that's sort of a team thing, but you have Smart, you have Thompson, you have Tatum, Brown, all these guys that have defensive identities that haven't been able to individually raise his team's level on that end. But what drives me the craziest about him, and this is something we've been talking about for years, me and you, numerous times this season he has said, we're playing for something bigger. These teams like the Pistons, these teams like the Magic, they're coming at us, but we're playing for something bigger. Regular season games don't matter. All that kind of stuff. He has said it numerous times this year. And meanwhile, all year long, they've been floating around along at 500. Now they're struggling to make the playoffs. And that's going to be the comment from this year that when you look back on this season and just think about the attitude of this team, one of its leaders, Tristan Thompson, saying, we don't need the regular season, and then barely making the playoffs. Horrible look. And I think this team took on that kind of attitude this year, that we just came off the East Finals. We're going to get back there. Like, we don't need a great seed. And it just drove me crazy.
I think it's a lesson that they have to learn, right? Like, I think actually that happened for the Cavs.
Shouldn't Thompson know that?
I mean, he was also part of teams that flip the switch. Like the last time he was on a playoff team, he was on a major flip the switch team, right? Like I think it happened for the Cavs in the play-in game, like when they were competing for the play-in games as well, because that first game against Chicago, when there wasn't Zach LaVine, they thought, okay, you know what? We're healthy now. Like we have our full lineup. There's no LaVine. We're just going to walk to a win. That's not the case. Like when I think of Boston and when they've played their best, it's because they were annoying ass tryhards.
Yeah,
they were a team that really just got under your skin. They drove me nuts, but you respect it at the same time. Yes, they have talent, but their defining identity has been the Marcus Smart tryhard. That hasn't been the team this year. That's not who they've been, and they need to get back to that. They're not someone that out-talents people that just, okay, we'll turn it on when we need to, and that'll be good enough. That's not who this team is.
But they think they are, and that's a problem to me. And I don't know how you fix that. Maybe that's coaching. Maybe that's getting a guy like Thompson out of there, which certainly could happen this offseason.
Yeah.
But they do need veterans. They do need some guys that are going to instill some leadership on this roster. And again, I don't crush Brown and Tatum. That's starting to happen around here on the radio and other things as they're starting to get the criticism now. I think they've done a fairly good job at stepping up into that role this year. Tatum has played just about he only missed 5 games with COVID, and some of those were postponements. So he fought to get back. I thought Brown was a tremendous leader early this year, stepped up his passing game, all that different kind of stuff. I don't like the way they defended this year, but guys who step into bigger offensive roles usually regress a little bit on the defensive end of the floor. So I think that's a little bit more excusable from them. And they're so early into their playmaking careers each. There we go. 13-point game. I don't know. You hope this team hasn't lost itself mentally because, like you said, there's still a lot of good stuff there. What I worry most now as the season just kind of falls apart is that Evan Fournier is going to look at it and say, do I really want to be here? Because obviously you traded for a guy on an expiring contract. They can still probably give him the best offer. I don't know what his market's going to be around the league, but they need him bad. And they'll have no way to replace him if he just leaves.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I just can't get over this is the game that Kevin Love decides to put it all together, which...
Look at that contest by Tatum. I mean, come on.
I mean, he's a good damn player. Like, it's like, at the end of the day, like, I'm not stressing about lottery odds because it's flat, right? Like, I don't really worry about that. It's fine. It's not like this is going to have a big impact on it. But, like, it's also higher than it would have been if they were healthy all season. If they were healthy all season, if they had Kevin Love for as many games as they did last year, and he was as productive as he was last year, they had Larry Nance, if they had their guys, if they didn't have multiple stretches where they've played at least a month this season without a single active point guard on the roster, this is a team that probably would have been competing for a play-in. So they're going to be picking higher than they should be, theoretically. But, like, man, it's at the same time, when you want these young players to be in competitive situations, it's frustrating. It's absolutely frustrating. But you know what? I know. Oh my! I thought they were going to count that shot from Sexton.
Well, I'm looking at this right now. How about this for a highlight? Verjao goes to work on Cornet in the paint. Let's see what happened here.
I still can't believe that's not Tyler Zeller. I looked at him and was like, "Oh, Tyler Zeller back in the league. How about that?"
We have some pixelation here, but you get the idea.
Holy
my
crap!
Lord.
What is wrong with your internet, buddy?
Well, those are some good moves.
Woof.
Why'd they bring him back?
Is your router a toaster? What's going on there?
Why is Anderson Varejao on this team? That's what a lot of people are wondering.
Because there's a week left in the season, and he wanted to retire as a Cavalier, and they got a hardship exception because half the team's dead. Like, it's silly. It's dumb.
Was he playing in Brazil?
Yeah, he was. He's playing in Brazil the last couple of years, and yeah. I think this helps probably with his Olympic qualifications for the summer as well. Gets to retire as a Cav, so his last moment in the NBA wasn't with the Warriors in a random February game. Like, there was some complaining about this. So, I mean, the Athletic this year, and they even wrote about it, how they haven't had a lot of positive coverage for the Cavs, or any. They only really write about them when things are going bad, with the exception of Kelsey Russo. But Joe Varden criticized the team for not taking chances on G League guys, like that Anderson Varejao's presence is preventing them from finding a Kendrick Nunn type player. When this year, like, you look at Broderick Thomas, who's played well. Dean Wade, who they developed through the G League. Lamar Stevens, who's undrafted, that's played really well. Kevin Gailey, who they picked up. Like, all these guys are actually out there and contributing. At this point, the G League season is over. It's been mined. Like, there's no one to look at. So when you have a week left of the season, it's not even a real contract. It's just a hardship exception. Like, it's not the end of the world to give that to Varejao. Like, it's silly. It doesn't really do anything for me. It doesn't even drum up nostalgia for me. But to actually suggest that it's like a harmful move, to me, is silly.
I want to get the stat from Matt Moore, because the Celtics right now, you know what they're going to do is actually pull within 3 by the final buzzer. So it'll look like the Cavs won by 3. And they've done this numerous times in recent weeks. He had an interesting stat on their fake comebacks all year long. They've obviously been the #1 offense in the second half of games since the All-Star break. So they turn it up in a lot of these second halves on big comebacks, and they have 3 minutes to do it here. But they never crossed that finish line. They did against the Spurs in that Tatum 60-point game. But they probably don't have enough time to make up 13 here. We'll see. But my guess is that they're going to make it really close and fall just short. That's probably a push-off by Tatum there. It's a move he gets away with quite a bit, but don't think he did there.
I don't know. I'd allow it. Let him do whatever he wants, man. That's what I say.
There he goes again. Good look for Fournier. Good. So there's 10. Fournier's been incredible. It's too bad that isn't going to matter, and that Kemba Walker's late season resurgence isn't going to matter all that much either. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what you say about the Celtics team. They might drop from the 7 seed at this point if they lose out. And if they can't beat the Cavs, I don't know who they're going to beat them the stretch here. Minnesota played them tough last time. Knicks are playing with great spirit. They're a tough schedule late in this season. So it just kind of feels like the Celtics sense that they're done and are doing a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy here down the stretch of the season. How will this impact the Cavs? We'll take a look at Tankathon.
Ties them with Minnesota. So I think they'll be in like a tie for 5th or whatever.
Yeah, and the Magic will jump up. Other games going on tonight. We have the Spurs and Nets. Nets winning big. Mavs blowing out the Pelicans. Hawks clinched a playoff spot. Good for them. They had a great second half to this year. Wizards get stopped in their tracks a bit in their race for the 8. So it's probably going to be Celtics Hornets in that play-in game.
Yeah.
You picking the Hornets there?
Oh my God. No, just because Boston has the best player, but I don't feel confident about it. I don't feel great about that. But
I guaranteed on the post-game show that the Celtics will find their way in the round 1, which didn't sound that bold to me. But they very well could lose 2 games and just bow out here, especially if it's against the Hornets and then the Wizards in the next one. The Wizards are really the ones who mix this up because they are a scarier team than ever. Just as Bradley Beal going to be healthy for that game. That's going to be tough for them with less than a week until those games get started.
Jeez.
So there's Tatum 9-point game, 2 minutes to go. And I told you exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be like a 97 to 94 final. Sexton picking up a little bit of a double there. You don't like this matchup for Boston here with Grant on him. Stays well with him there. Okoro loses the ball. He's a deep 3 shot clock. So C's going to have to score on just about every possession here, but there's a narrow chance that they could pull this off. I'm thinking about the standing impact here for Boston. I believe they had 2 games on the Hornets in the tiebreaker. So I get why they're packing it in a bit here. Smart didn't play tonight. No Kemba in these back-to-backs. Rob's probably going to sit for the rest of the regular season. They got 2 on the Hornets, tiebreaker as well. 2 games left. So they're very close to clinching that 7, especially after the Wizards lost tonight. Pacers actually in the 9.
Mm-hmm.
They're staying alive well despite their injuries.
Oh, man.
All right, 1:30 to out of here, Justin. We made it.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm
course,
running out of steam. I'm running out of gas. I don't know what else to say.
Of course, we get a stoppage here. Wait, what's going on? Clock issue? There we go. Cavs wine. Have you ordered any Cavs wine?
I have not. This is a significant game for me, though, as someone that dropped some money on the Cavs season over. This takes them to 22 wins. So there you go. They hit their over bet for Vegas. So you know what? It is what it is.
You know what else was a good line tonight?
What's
Cavaliers plus 6.5.
Yeah, that I don't do betting on the Cavs anymore. Not on a game-to-game basis. I'll do big picture stuff. I'll do over-under. But game-to-game, that just takes the emotion to a dark place and
yes,
impacts my ability to objectively analyze anything that's going on. So,
especially when you get into the lines. Why aren't they guarding up there?
Exactly, right? Like it just clouds the judgment.
Yeah.
For me, I like to provide objective analysis through the eyes of an optimist. That's usually my goal. And that makes it a whole lot more difficult when there's money riding on it, especially in a pandemic when money can be a little tight, not the most liquid time of my life.
And that is probably the game there. With Kevin Love icing it, Tatum gets it right back, but we have 55 seconds left. I can and I can't believe the Celtics lost this. Like, it is like every new low they hit, it's just shocking, but it's not. All at the same time. And I'm still kind of in shock that this is where the season has gone to, because there was always that hope that if they got healthy, they got the whole team together. They've looked pretty good this year when they've had most of their starting cast together. But they went an entire season this year without having their full roster intact for a game. Thompson was out to start the year. Then Tatum. You had various Brown absences. Thompson and Romeo were out forever. Kemba obviously missed every back-to-back as well as a handful of games to start this year. But it's still something deeper than this. You got to beat the Cavs. You have to at least come within 10 of the Cavs with Jayson Tatum available. And this just ended up being a rough game for him. And credit to Okoro, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he made him work, right? Like I'm still so impressed with Isaac Okoro. Like the fact that he came in this season and ended up being their best perimeter defender, like that is just not something that rookies do, especially rookies that don't have summer league, that had a shortened training camp, that are playing 4 games every single week in a really condensed schedule without practice, without real
Isn't
time
that
to work on the
something?
game.
This rookie class as a whole did well with that.
They are special. Like this is a special group, and like a whole lot of the analysis that said like that this is one of the weakest rookie classes that there is. Like, yeah, that's true. Like the way that I always look at weak draft classes is, are they ready to come in and contribute year one? Or are they guys that are going to take more time, that you really matters on where they get drafted, how strong the player development is. And I think this is a class that has strengths, but was going to take some time, that needed to land in the right situation. And I think a lot of these guys landed in spots that benefited them. Like I think LaMelo with Charlotte, when he first went down, they kept winning. They kept winning because they had good veterans around. Gordon Hayward played a big part of that. Terry Rozier's been good. Like they have solid infrastructure there, and that's helped him kind of play free basketball and to make an impact. And even Halliburton, like De'Aaron Fox, is a really, really damn good player. Like there are some smart veterans on that team, even though they're not particularly well coached. And the other thing that I think people forgot was that, yeah, COVID really impacted their ability to have organized practice and whatnot. But a lot of these guys were still out there. They were still working on their games, and they had 9 months to prepare for this season. So they weren't working with a team. But even Okoro, like you could tell his jump shot was more fluid than it was at Auburn. LaMelo was a much better player and a more polished player than we saw in Australia. Like it's such a weird year, but I got to give a lot of credit to this rookie class for how they've come in and how they've contributed.
No, you can almost feel good about every single guy in this first round. You saw signs from just about all of them in their various situations. And depth guys, too. I mean, Williams looks great. Okoro looks great in their locations. Okongwu, once he finally got on the court for Atlanta, has made some impact there. Few rougher picks there, but Hayes was hurt. Toppin hasn't gotten a ton of opportunity this year. Denny, we'll see what happens there. I wasn't totally impressed with him. But Vassell, good contributor. Halliburton, top 3 rookie of the year finisher there. Lewis and Neesmith got going at various points. Anthony has been very impressive in Orlando. Stort's been impressive all season in Detroit. Pokusevski, you've seen the signs. Sadiq Bey broke a 3-point shooting record I saw recently for most games with 5 threes by a rookie, I believe. Precious Achiuwa has been a part of that Heat rotation. Maxey was good early on for the Sixers. Sadiq Najee in Denver. Hampton, I love him going to Orlando. He'll get a lot more opportunity there. Quickly, we know what he's done. Pritchard, one of the best shooters in this draft. And now we're getting all the way to 30, and we're still naming impact guys. Desmond Bane has been the best shooter in this draft so far. This is looking like one of the deepest drafts we've ever seen.
Yeah, it really has a lot of guys that are ready to contribute.
And this was considered a bad draft coming in, wasn't it?
Yeah, one of the worst. This was like, and I often think, like, I think the talent coming into drafts right now is higher than it's ever been. But when you talk about whether or not it's a good or bad draft, it's usually more about the top end talent. Like, I think that's really what this was people thought LaMelo was going to take more time. Like, LaMelo is the one guy that I thought had all-star upside, but I thought it would take a couple of years for him to go out there and be that type of player.
He is killing it right now.
Yep.
So have you done a lot on next year's draft? How's that one looking?
Good. I mean, it's like, I want the Cavs to pick high. Obviously, I think Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green is a perfect fit for them.
Cunningham would be huge for that group for sure.
But if they fall, like, there is still some really damn good players that fit well with what they need. Like Scotty Barnes, great example of that. Like kind of a power forward version of Isaac Okoro with really good passing vision. You hope that the Cavs player development staff can add a jump shot to him because they've had success with that in the past. Moses Moody is a great fit for them as well. Giddy out of Australia is a really promising point forward. Like, there's a lot of playmaking forwards in this draft, which is what the Cavs need. Like that's you want to have the best possible odds, but under this new format, like it's flat. Like you can. Is it really worth sacrificing player development to have the worst record in the league when the worst record in the league gives you a 48% chance of picking fifth?
No, and I think we've seen time and time again, it's hard to go from losing to winning, even if you get the talent. Cleveland, Detroit, Phoenix for the longest time. Like these teams that have lost year in and year out, it's hard to turn around, even if you get some good pieces. You have to develop something, and I always said this to those middling years for Boston too. You got to go and win. Like tanking, even if you get the right guys, is not beneficial if you're not setting a foundation there for those guys to join. And I think Cleveland's done a good job with that this year. You're 100% right. They have not tanked. They have battled, and they've put a foundation in place, and they've added pieces this year. That Jared Allen addition was probably the most important thing to happen to them this year. And then that helped Garland grow. Sexton had a fantastic year. And now looks like they're adding Love back into the fold, and hopefully he'll be healthy next year.
Maybe. I mean, it's at the very least, this is a nice little sign that there's still some gas left in the tank, right? Like, I still think they should explore every option with him. And if there's a chance to kind of get a fresh start for both him and the team, I think that might be worthwhile to look into. But I mean, at the end of the day, Jesus.
Oh, there's a turnover. All right, let's give it one more possession.
So there's a question in the chat. Who should the Raptors select if they go number one? It's Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham is in a tier of his own. I think Evan Mobley's closest to that tier, but Cade is the pick. No matter who picks first overall, Cade's the pick. That simple.
Ooh, miss there. We'll talk about the...
You can have a Tatum level scorer that provides great passing. Like, Cade is amazing.
And there it is. Cavaliers beat the Celtics. Another team ends their 10-game losing streak against Boston. And we'll see where this goes. Just 2 more games left in the season. Justin Rowan, thank you for being here. Great conversation. Always good talking to you. We will see you in the offseason, all right?
I'll talk to you later, man. You have a good one. Thank you so much for having me.